Kathmandu. This is the 10th of March, 2015. You look over here and see the Himalayas. Can you believe you're in Nepal?
Yes.
That particular range of a mountain that we're looking at, it's a part of the Himalayas, and that is known as Ganesh Himal, and that is the mountain which is the closest from Kathmandu Valley. Ganesh Himal, and as the crow flies, it's about 40 miles away from Kathmandu Valley.
This is our hotel in Kathmandu. We've just arrived. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
These are the room members, James and Brandon, 241, and Carmela and Rona, 240. And you can order your food here, right? And the beers usually come here in big bottles, which is 600. Yeah, it's like 650 milliliters. Because I guess from your used to cans. They do have canned Everest beer, which is the beer that most people like. If you want to just sign it to your room, and you can pay all the bills. A day tea and coffee. Oh, that's a nice spot out there. You can look down. That looks the forest, right? And it's cold for us. You know, I got my down jacket, but many of you actually find it very pleasant. And if you want to eat breakfast outside, you can also do that. Born in Nepal, there actually was a big controversy about it. Many people said that no, he was born in India, but it has been proved beyond doubt that he was born in Nepal. Kathmandu is one of the very few places which has 7 World Heritage Sites, and the whole of Nepal has 10 World Heritage Sites. Lumbini, the birthplace of Buddha, is one of them, right? And you know, there was always this debate. I'm sure you must have heard about Narendra Modi, right, the Prime Minister, and they all think, and I would also like to think that he's got the magic wand, right? Right? And when he came here, he was one of the very few people that owned the heart of millions of Nepalis, right? And we do not say we're a landlocked country, we say we're India locked. Because to the east, west and south, we border India. To the north, we have Tibet. And people ask me, are you more influenced by the Chinese or by the Indians? We have nothing in common with the Chinese, and China was way too far out. Have any one of you been to Tibet? It's about the size of Western Europe. It's pretty big, right? Yes, even today, the people who live up into the mountains, they have been influenced by the Tibetan culture, but never by Chinese culture. So when he came here, he addressed the parliament. His first line was, I'm glad to be in the land of the birthplace of Buddha. So he cleared the air, right? So no more controversies, and he did talk about other things, and we actually rely on Indians for a lot of our things, and we must give them due credit for helping us develop the infrastructure of the country. So this is where he was born, but even though he was born here, only 9% of the people are Buddhist. 81% of the people are Hindus. Now it's a secular state, but till the time when the king used to be an absolute monarch, this was an official Hindu kingdom, right? And right now we are in the process of drafting a constitution, right? And we're only about the size of Wisconsin, but we got 601 parliament members, right? When you got 601 parliament members trying to draft a constitution, right? It's like, what do you say, too many cooks spoil the broth? It's pretty similar like that. And yes, I would like to talk more about it, but you know, this is a big transition phase. People talk a lot about bad things, but you know, I've lived here all my life and I've seen a lot of changes, and I would like to think that many of those changes are for good. Yes, there are bad things, especially if you talk to my mother who's 81. She doesn't like the change, right? But my son who's 21, he gets to see all these things and he's happy with the changes. And why there are so many motorcycles in here right now, maybe they've come to a wedding. Would you like to see what a typical house looks like? So this is a house where they have 3 generations living in the same house. And what they do is, they live up above, right? And they don't have a living room. So you come here, you say, hey, Tom, Dick and Harry, or here we call it Ram Sham, right? That's like a Tom, Dick and Harry. And they look out of the window and they would say, and this is, previously they used to have mats made out of rice straws. You would sit there, and whenever you would go to a Nepali house, the first thing that they would offer you is a cup of tea. And what's a good tea? A good tea is considered to be half a glass of water, half a glass of water buffalo milk, and 2 spoonfuls of sugar. Right? I know you don't like it that way, so but that is considered to be a delicacy. And if they come here in the evening and if they're preparing some snacks, so that's where you sit. But normally they would not have people inside, right? And the good thing is, previously in these places they didn't have an outhouse or nor electricity. But now you do notice, you wouldn't want to be an electrician in Nepal, would you, with all these wires? You must have seen that in India, right? They do have electricity, they have their television, which is a status symbol, but they also have an outhouse, one where they can take a shower, one which would be a toilet. Right? And what they do is, they paint their houses with cow dung and mud, right? Because they believe that cow dung serves as some kind of thing that kills bacteria. So that's a very common thing. I grew up in an old house, and I grew up in a family where we have 14 people, including my cousins and my grandfather. And it was good in a way because in the winter, it was nice and warm. During the summer, it was nice and cool. But there were rats running around all the place. And we didn't have proper plumbing, right? And we didn't have proper wires either. And my mother and my aunt were busy cleaning the house all day because there were rats running around all the place, right? So that's a common thing. Thank you. They said they all go to the wedding house. Why don't you take them to the wedding place? Let's try our luck, please. Do you realize that we are one of the world's 32 landlocked countries? So we never get snow in Kathmandu Valley. The coldest temperature that we get in the valley would be 32. Or for an exception, if it does get rain, it will go down to 28. But the afternoon would be like 60, 65, which is very pleasant. You know, these are so kind that last time when I was here at Holi, this is where we came and played Holi with the local people. And you know, you don't get to see something like this very often. So, did you hear about that?
You know what is moving about Namaste. Region. Backy.
Bad ears. And what's your name? Beautiful.
Look at the top of the mountain, changing the color. You were white earlier, it's not pink or whatever, it's beautiful. See, it would be a very sad occasion for the girl because, you know, she's leaving the parents. And the big difference about getting married is, see, in your part of the world, a woman gets married to her husband, but here, she gets married to the whole family. She does not know what the husband's going to be like.
Arranged marriage?
Mama, maijule paile chineko ki?
Chineko, love marriage.
Oh, it's a love marriage, it's not an arranged marriage. So she must be happy, right? So, but in the olden times, you know, it wasn't the case, and there was always a fear of a mother-in-law, right? And it takes them a while to get used to the new house, but it's a happy occasion because they now have a new family member, right? So they are all rejoicing, right? So this particular festival, which is known as Ratteuli, in the olden days, men were not allowed. They used to have it in a private room. The woman who dressed up as men, they would have mustache, right? And you know, they were pretending as if they were holding hands, things that they were not supposed to be seen doing in public. But now, you know, times have changed, so men have also participating in that. So I think It was a great thing that we got to see her. And thank you so much that all of you agreed to come out. Because like I said, you never know what you're going to see. And that's why I tell you, always bring your cameras. The wedding is today. The groom is at the bride's house. They wear the red color because red is the symbol of happiness, prosperity, and joy. The wedding is today. Like I said, the groom has gone to the bride's house. They have certain ceremonies that they have to go through. And after it's over, he probably is in the process of driving back to this place. But they are good about 2 hours away from this house.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So we're now going back into the hotel grounds. We're now coming back into the hotel and we'll have dinner. So this is the clubhouse at the hotel where we're having dinner tonight.
So I would like to begin the tour from the local market. And when I go there, it brings back memories. See, I grew up in a family of 14, including my grandparents, my cousins. Like I said, we do not have the concept of a cousins. They are your brothers and sisters. And as my mother was the youngest mother-in-law, so her duty was every month she had to go to this market and where she would buy grocery for 14 of us for one whole month. But every time, two days ago in advance, she would sit down and write all the things. And you know, for 14 people for a month, that's a long list, including rice, lentils, pulses, you name it. And then the shopkeeper would say, okay, come back after 3 hours. And I used to be a little kid and he would give me some candies. And my mother just loved it. Because that is where she would get to meet the neighbors from our area. She would also get to see the family members from our parents' side of the family. That's because that was the only place where you could buy everything at one go. And they used to go to a tea stall, which still exists, and there they would be chatting, right, having a good time. And you know, we never had any problems when we were growing up. A kid disappearing, kids getting kidnapped and things like that. So I used to walk around, and after 3 hours, my biggest thrill was my mother would then hire 2 rickshaws, as there were very few taxis and they could take all the loads. So I would be sitting on a sack of rice on top, and we had kerosene oil, mustard oil, all kind of spices, and my mother would be on the other one because one was obviously not enough to fit in everything and the 2 of us. And that was a place where my last 5 generations have lived, where everybody knew everybody. That's not the case anymore, right? And as I would get into my neighborhood, I'd be sitting on a sack of rice, and I would be screaming and yelling at everyone that I could see, and hey, here I am, I've got my own rickshaw, I've got my own rickshaw. So every time I go there, it brings back memories. Fresh vegetables, we had to buy it every single day. There were actually a couple of guys who would grow these organic vegetables. We did not know the word organic because everything was organic back in those days. And this time of the year, you'd get fresh cauliflower, spinach, and we eat a lot of potatoes. For every vegetable, we add potato onto it. And we used to buy them in sacks. And onions also in sacks because we do use a lot of onions and garlics and all those things. Meat, if we would get to eat once a month, that was a luxury, right? And we didn't have a lot of chicken, but lamb, or what we call mutton, was considered to be a delicacy. And there was a butcher right next door, and we'd get him, go to his place, and he would say, how much? And can you believe that? We would say, oh, for a family of 14, and we always had guests coming over, right? But we had such an extended family, and it always would be on a Saturday, which is a government holiday. And for the 14 of us and few guests, our budget was only for 2 kilos. Now remember, a kilo is 2.2 pounds, right? And that's not very much. And as I was the youngest, I'll be lucky if I would get 2 pieces of meat, right? I think of all of that and it brings back memories, but you know, we had a great time. Where my mother used to go and have loads and loads of cups of teas is still there. And in our trip to the old city of Kathmandu, which is known as Kathmandu Darbar Square, there are a couple of highlights. The first is, you do realize that we had hippies in Nepal. What do you call them? The flower children or something like that? And there are people say all kinds of things about the hippies, but I say, hey, these are the people who put Nepal on the map of the world, right? And there were reasons for them to be here. If they had $5 American, that would have been enough for them to eat 2 meals a day and to get a small room. Marijuana, till 1971, was legal, and they could buy it, smoke it, and whenever they would run out of their money, they would start selling their jeans and sunglasses, which would sell like hotcakes. The main highlight of our trip there is, we will go and try to see this young little girl who is known, regarded, and worshipped as a living goddess. So we're talking about this little girl, and the interesting thing is, she becomes a Hindu goddess when she's selected as one. But a girl from a Hindu family can never ever become a living goddess. She has to come from a family of a Buddhist goldsmith. So that proves the harmony between Hindus and Buddhists in Nepal. And when she's about to be chosen, she must be beautiful, like an angel. No cuts, no blemishes. In fact, according to the book, there are 32 perfections that she must have. For instance, it says that she should have a body of a banyan tree, a cheeks of a lion, eyes like a deer, her hair up to her hips, and a voice like a duck. Whatever that means, but you certainly do not expect that in a girl who's only about 3 to 5. And also, when she's about to be selected, in the olden days, when the king used to be an absolute, when Nepal was a kingdom, the horoscope of the little girl should match with the horoscope of the king, because she is there to help the king run the country. And after that, she would be taken to a temple, which I will show it to you later. And there in the middle of the night, when they would have already sacrificed 108 water buffaloes, you have the heads on one side, the bodies on the other side, and there would be stains of blood all over the place. And it is a disgusting sight. And she has to be there all by herself. And the most important thing is, had she been an ordinary child, she probably would have got scared to death. But we do not believe that she's a normal child, but she's an incarnation of Goddess herself. So the tradition so far has been, or the tradition is, the one who has the most of the perfections, the one who gets the least scared, and also whose horoscope would match with the horoscope of the ruler, she's selected to be the new living goddess. And after that, she's taken to the house where I'll take you. Now, it's not compulsory for them to bring out the girl every time I take my clients. They might bring her out, they might not bring her out, but if they do bring her out, that's the only time during your stay in Nepal when you're not allowed to take a picture. That's because this little girl, who does come out of the house only 13 days a year, that's when people take undue advantage of it, and that is when she is photographed. And once she's been selected as a living goddess, it's only the girl who moves into that house. The whole family does not move along with her. She lives with a caretaker family. And also the other interesting thing is, to be a living goddess, here, both her parents, her father and mother, also has to be from Kathmandu. That's another criteria. And once she's been chosen as a living goddess, we would go there. Some people go every day, some people go on special occasions. And she would be worshipped exactly the same way when we would go inside a temple and worship different idols or images of gods and goddesses. And even though she may only be a small child, the religion says you're not supposed to teach her anything. She's supposed to know everything by herself, but the truth is they actually groom her. And when we go there, she'd worship like a gods and goddesses, and I myself have gone up there many a times. I've got to take my shoes off. If I have a leather belt, I take it off. I go there. She sits on a small chair. I touch her feet with my forehead, and she blesses me with a tika. You know the red mark that they put here? With a tika, and she doesn't talk to you. Because she's not a normal child, she's a goddess, and goddesses do not talk to human beings. And when does she retire? Is she like the Dalai Lama for the rest of her life? No. This little girl in our society is known as Kumari, which means a virgin. So she gets to be the living goddess as long as the blood does not come out from our body in any form. If she has a nose bleeding, she's no longer a living goddess. If she cuts herself with a knife, she's no longer a living goddess. So she would normally retire when she would reach her first puberty, which would depend entirely on her physical structure. That's the way it used to be, but now the rule is, once you're 11, whether you bleed or not, they find a new one. We're more conscious. I'm so glad that everybody's saying, oh, it looks so clean. And I tell you, it's much cleaner than what it used to be about 5 years ago. Now the government is making all these ponds, restoring all these things. And you see the serpent right in the middle, right? And this is where people would gather late in the evening, talk about politics and everything. And to my left hand side, which would be all right inside, you see all the wall going all the way far there and down here. This used to be the former royal palace. Before Nepal was declared as a republic, this is where the king from 1969 stayed here. I'll show you the royal palace where they used to live before that. And when Nepal was declared as a republic, unanimously by 601 parliament members, the deposed king was given 2 weeks to pack his bags and to vacate the palace, which he did that right on time. And after that, it got opened up as a museum. And you know, I'll be very honest, my family always have been a royalist, right? And we're not allowed to go inside the royal palace as a common people. So the first day when they announced that was going to open, I went there, had a look. It was good, but not as grand as I thought that it would be, right? And what was the most surprising thing was, I believe the size of your bedrooms at the hotel isn't that too small, right? It is even smaller than the rooms that you have at the hotel, right? So half of the building, I will ask my friend to go a little slow, so you might want to take a picture. And the deposed king's grandmother, who is now 90 plus, when she was asked that she needs to vacate the palace, she says, over my dead body. So they came up with a deal that the king and his family would have to leave the palace, but the queen mother is still there, right? And I think it was a good thing that they worked out on that, right? And I've been there and I wanted to see where she lived, but we were not allowed in there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, coming up to my right hand side, you'll see a street. It's known as the King's Way, because as this would lead to the King's Palace, and this is the most expensive place in Nepal. Just to give you an idea how expensive property is out here, you do realize that we are one of the most poorest countries in the whole world. Many a times when people come here from India, they say, oh, this looks much more prosperous. Do you get that impression? It looks cleaner, you even have sidewalk. That may be the way it looks, but their economy is way ahead than ours, right? But here, 2 years ago, 374 square feet of land was sold for 700,000 American dollars. This is where they have all the branded shop, nice restaurant, quite a few airlines, branded shops, including Reebok and Levi's and etc. If you look to my right hand side, that's the Royal Palace, right? Can you see that? And this is the famous King's Way. And if you would have a piece of land in here, your next 3 generations will not starve to death. To my right hand side, ladies and gentlemen, is the oldest high school in Nepal, 1854. 1854. Now, ladies and gentlemen, would you please get yourself organized? This is where we're going to get off. Now, remember, once we leave here, you're not going to see the bus for next 4 or 5 hours. We go see the local market, we go and hopefully see the Living Goddess, the old city center, and then we go to the backpackers area where we have lunch. And you see that temple in the middle? That's a temple dedicated to Shiva, and that opens only once a year when we Hindus are celebrating the Festival of Lights. And it's also known as the Festivals of the Brothers and the Sisters, where the brothers are blessed by the sisters, and those people who do not have a brother or a sister, that's where they go and get blessed by Lord Shiva. Rani Pokhari. In our olden days, if you were to see a woman wearing, a married woman, anything but a sari, she would have been frowned upon. And I remember my sisters, when they went to school, they had to cover their knees with their frocks. And when I got married about 23 years ago, little did I know that someday I could actually see my wife going to a gym with tracksuit and taking laps at the swimming pool. Well, you see those Punjabis, the skirts and the long trousers, that's what they're getting popular. But now, like my wife works for a bank, which is a casual day, it's a half day, and now I see her wearing jeans, right? And things have changed a lot, and it's only rightly so. And people also tell me that here in Kathmandu, you probably see more girls wearing Western clothes than you do actually see in India. But when my wife is home, that's what she wears. And it says, I don't think you can afford that. It says that the minimum that you have to pay for one of those is $4, and the best quality is $10. But you know what? When women go to our weddings, not only the mothers, but also the daughters, they borrow their mother's sari and they ask them to help it put it on because they think it makes them more elegant, more feminine, and they have these high heels and they look more matured. And also when you walk around here, ladies and gentlemen, you'll see those people selling these Nike t-shirts, Reebok shoes. These are all genuine fake. To open the shop, the first thing they do is they clean the shop and they burn incense, hoping they will have a good day. So I have a favor to ask, let's all stay together. When I get to the center of the town, that's where you'll have some free time. You can wander around, we'll meet at one place and then we'll continue our tour, please. Anybody has a right to go there and do the rituals. And the gods are worshipped with vermilion powder, flowers, rice. And Ganesh, as you can tell, has a big belly because he likes sweets. And Tuesday is considered to be a great day for us to worship him. But any god that I go to, I worship them along the way, and I hope you don't mind me doing that along the way. So how do you do it? So ladies and gentlemen, you must have noticed now that I have a tika. It's not a bindi. Bindi is a thing that the women have it. It's a sign of a beauty, but it's a blessing. So whenever you see men or women having the red vermilion powder, or it could be yellow, certain time it could be ashes, that tells you that they visited a temple and they've been blessed. And I try and make sure that it stays all day long, and it'll only wash off when I take a shower when I get back to the hotel. And the flower in here are the blessing of the gods. It's a sign of a purity. In our society, if you see women having the red vermilion powder here, that tells you they're married. right? But you don't see a lot of married women, like my wife does that only on special occasions. She says that that's not good for her hair. Well, I leave it up to her, right? And the Nepalese calendar is one of them. We're already in 2071, and the 14th of April we will be entering 2072. So, people want to have their calendars not only to keep track of the dates, but there are so many festivals. Certain days that you can get married, certain days you cannot get married. Like here, it says it's Mother's Day. Boy, I'm in trouble. I better remember that, Mother's Day, right? And then, on the 18th, that's a Labor Day, which is a government holiday, right? And this is when we celebrate the anniversary of Lord Buddha. So when you buy calendars, you have all these important things, and this has your horoscopes, and that tells you what your month is going to be like. See, I was born December. Now, December in your part of the world, you would be what?
Aquarius.
Aquarius, but I'm a Libra. That's because we have a different calendar year, and it all depends what time of the day were you born, the position of the stars and the moon. That decides what it's going to be. So that's why you see these calendars being sold. And right now, you know, everybody is talking about, I did tell you that yesterday was an exceptionally clear day. So if that can make the headlines, this is the government mouthpiece called Gorkha Patra. Our language is very similar to Hindi. The good thing is we can understand them, but they cannot understand us, right? So that's great. So when you see something like this, that tells you I was not exaggerating that how clear a day it was, and you're coming into Nepal, just could not have been better timed. And the other thing is, you know, a lot of people got stranded. My last group stranded here for 3 days, right? And there are so many people traveling, and they're all blaming it in the airline, saying that they did not accommodate them in the hotels, they were giving nothing. And many people who are traveling to the Middle Eastern countries at cheap labor, they don't have enough money. So, you know, they were sleeping out on the airport, right? And there's a lot of pressure that the government makes sure that these airlines, which did not pay any compensation to these people, that they get compensated. Because that morning, the Turkish Airlines skidded off the runway and got to a thing and had his nose dived in the ground. He was the best pilot, that's what they say. He saved so many lives, and unfortunately we did not have the equipments to lift that plane, because as that is the only runway, so no other planes could land or take off except for domestic flights. So that after 2 days, thanks to the Indian government, they sent an Indian Air Force plane with all the equipments, and it took them 2 more days to clear it. And then later, we had a record of, we had the airport open 24 hours a day, and thousands of people, the airlines were having extra flights, and they eventually got to go home. But I'm so glad to tell you that things are normal right now. Now the good thing is, they actually have a sign that if you have cigarettes, you get cancer of the lungs and all those things. But I hate to tell you, in spite of that, you don't see too many people smoking out here. Yesterday somebody said, did you see some woman smoking at the wedding?
Yeah, 2.
Right? 2.
2 older ladies.
You don't see that, but my son tells me, Dad, the latest craze with the young girls in high schools and colleges is have vodka and cranberry, what you call Cape Codder, is that right? That's what I was told. And also the girls smoke because they think the boys will get attracted to them. Supadi, that's a great word, sir. The supadi, this is a supadi, and people have it. I used to chew it a lot after.
What is that? Chewing tobacco?
It's a nut. And what they do is they put it in small pieces and put it in a betel nut.
Yeah.
Right. And thank God people in Kathmandu Valley do not use the same amount of betel nuts that they do in India. But if you were to go down south, where they've been highly influenced by Indian culture out there, I go there quite often, and when you go there, you meet somebody, they say, come, let's go for a pan. The betel nut is pan, and they said, tobacco, of course, for you, sir. No, 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 not tobacco. So I have a sweet with no tobacco in it.
Backpacks on the wall.
It's a symbol of happiness. My mother is a widow. She can never have the red dress again in her lifetime. That picture that you do see is the picture of the deposed king's wife. And she was celebrating her birthday a few days ago. There still are some people who are trying to make sure that when the constitution is being drafted, the king gets to make a comeback as a constitutional monarch. So, and to say that, even though you're no longer a queen, but we still remember you. And her husband, we'll talk more about her husband later, he was an absolute dictator, but she was very simple, humble, and down to earth, but they really liked her. She kept her very low profile. They may look like one. These are actually soap that you do laundry with. They are made with palm oil, animal fat, or
Animal fat,
soapstone. And I've noticed that the old people who do it, even though they have a washing machine, they do not use the detergent. They do it with their. Last time my clients bought it, and because they got stuck, so you know, they had nothing to do, so they did the laundry, and they thought they would take this home as a souvenir. And they said, Sanji, we need to go back to that place. And something like this costs you, for 1 kilo, which is 2.2 pounds, cost you 80 cents. Right? So that's what they are. You see them being sold many places, and you do not know what you're looking at. That's what they are. Thank you.
What's the brand? Is that?
And this, he tells me, they use it for the dishes. Right? Have you noticed it's softer? Right? And whereas the other one is nowhere as soft.
I think I got some bird
Yeah.
shit on there.
Thank you. They demolished the whole building, and now I did tell you they sell all these metal and all these utensils. But the place where my mom would go and I would have, I don't know how many cups of teas along with some delicacies, used to be that store. And the reason, okay, have you heard the name Annapurna Mountain?
Yes.
The reason, it's one of the top 14,000 meters. And the reason why most people do know about Annapurna is because that was the first peak of 8,000 meters, which is 26,200 feet to have been climbed. And it's only after they climbed Annapurna, they had high hopes that they would eventually get to Everest someday, which they did later. And the word Annapurna meaning the goddess of plenty, the goddess of grain. And that temple over there, please, is the temple of Annapurna. So the local people decided that it would only be right that they sell their crops and their grains in here.
These are yak tails.
And it was because of his planning that they were able to conquer Kathmandu. So we're looking at a very old house in here.
Hard to get good light on that.
hotel dates from 1700.
It's got the blue border saying that we are a peace-loving nation. The red color tells you that no matter what creed, nationality, religion you are, we're all the same under the skin. It's got a sun and a moon, symbolizing that as long as there is sun and moon, Nepal will be there. Right? So it's very easily identified, and I'm sure you must have noticed that they have the Nepali flag in a frame as they enter the hotel. So if you ever see the Nepali participating in the Olympics with their flag and say, hey, that's a Nepali flag, right? Yeah, we do participate, but we never won an Olympic medal so far. But I'm sure in the years to come, we definitely will win a medal. The sun and the moon, symbolizing that as long as there is sun and moon, Nepal will be there. Religion are welcome, and I'm so glad that I can hear that music, which you don't get to hear very often. So they're actually doing some celebration, some ceremony, but the trouble is there are so many ceremonies. Even though I'm a local and a guide, I am not quite sure what it's all about, but it will be all right for us to go inside and take pictures. So, and like I said, it's like stepping back in time when you go in there. These are rosary beads. These are not sandalwood beads. We call them rudraksha, and it grows in trees.
So are they good?
Oh yes.
I guess the longer one, I guess.
Hello, bhai. Even he does not know what kind of a wood it is.
Oh, okay. It's
What do
nice.
you like, bro?
And if I get 5 or 6
Don't say that. कतिमा दिनुहुन्छ 5-6 वटा किन्यो भने 5-6 वटा किन्यो भने
Where they are burning a little over than 100,000 wicks. So they are doing that, and as this is a celebration, they've invited these young musicians to be a part of a celebration, and also these boys and girls are getting a chance to practice on their music as a group. And it's done, it's done by individual families. But I tell you, I come here all the time. Out of 20 times, maybe I'll be lucky if I get to see something like this, maybe 1 or 2 times. So it certainly was very good. These are what you call wood apple. It grows in the southern part of Nepal, and this is one of the things that you make an offering to Lord Shiva, right? And if you go to Sri Lanka, they make juice out of it. And it's very good for you. That's because it's got a lot of fiber in it. You may not like the taste, but the way they do it in Sri Lanka, as I've been told, they say it's one of the best things, and this is what you have as an offerings. And remember, whatever you see in here, these are only the offerings that people would buy when they come to do their rituals. See, these are cotton instrument. Carding, yeah, that's the word that I use, and it is actually carding. Most people, many a time people think it's some kind of a musical instrument, which is not.
But I thought it was.
And that guy is from India. Oh yeah, bhaiya. Now feel it, please. Each and every one of these guys, they carry something like this. And I'm sure you got no clue. So what they do is, on one side of this thing, banana, these are tobacco. Okay? And on the other side, to make it taste right, and also it's very good for your throat. I had a very bad infection. Somebody told me try this. These are lime. So what they do is, they take a little bit of a lime from there, and now he's processing that. He's making it refined. And after they do that, what they do is, they put it behind the lips. And they do that maybe 7-8 times a day, right? And they would have it there for like 10 minutes. And every now and then you hear them, you see them spitting. Because you know, they cannot swallow it, and when you have that, you have the gum coming out, so that's what they do. Does anybody want to smell it, what it smells like?
These are prayer wheels.
Now they said, sun has come too early, right? So they're not doing that good. And you will notice that certain times you will see 2 people. One, he plays. So what he does is,
to be the living manifestation of this goddess, of this temple. Before Nepal was a kingdom, was a republic, and what it used to be a kingdom, the rule was you could not make buildings higher than the temple itself. And I did tell you, when the living goddess is about to be selected, she is taken to a place where they sacrifice 108 water buffaloes. It takes place right in there. It opens only once a year, and at that time almost everybody in town make it a point to go and do the rituals. So now let's go straight to the place, because after a certain time they will not bring her out on the window.
see, we'll walk and we'll talk at the same time. It's one of the forms of Shiva. They call it Vaira. This god is also known as the god of. And you would not believe something that I tell you. So what people used to do in the olden days was, you would then ask me to come and swear in front of this god, because the belief is anybody who lies in front of this god bleeds to death. So this is a death. Vairav is the name of a Shiva. Mind your heads, everybody.
And this was the entrance into the courtyard. That's where she appeared in the center window. I now have the wide-angle lens on the camera. Gives a better view of the square.
Put Nepal on the map of the world. What's wrong with that? But you know, you don't argue with the locals. If they don't want it here, fine. And this is where they have their shops every day. You must have noticed everybody's selling the same thing. Nobody's buying anything, but they're still making a living. And you know why is that? Because they say their biggest customers right now are the Chinese. Out of the 700,000 tourists that we get in a year, the Chinese are the largest number of tourists coming into Nepal, with a number of 120,000. And we're hoping it will be even bigger. That the good thing is, as they are our neighbors, we have a direct flight that comes from different cities. And as a Chinese, do you know that there are only certain countries you're allowed to visit in the past? Now you see them everywhere. But the first thing that the Chinese would do after they get their passport was to travel to Nepal. And it is the Chinese coming and helping our economy, especially with tourism. The hippies were here. They used to sit on those platforms. You can still see some of the local guys sitting up there watching the world go by. So they now call it a hippie temple. So this is what is known as Kathmandu Darbar Square. And what does the word Darbar means? The word Darbar meaning a palace, right? People often get confused. They say, Sanjeev, you took into a palace square yesterday? And how come they all have the same name? That's because they all used to be separate kingdoms. And I would like to tell you more about it once you get inside the courtyard, please. Right. Yeah. Of Kathmandu for $5–10. And when the Chinese started coming, you see these things? Okay. There was some religious Chinese guru, and he said, hey, these are the eyes of Buddha. And they call it a Buddhist wish-fulfilling bead. Now, they're selling it. It can go from anything between $150 to $600. And there are places where they actually grow them. They try to grow them some other place, but for some reason they wouldn't grow. And the place where they grow them, they have security guards with guns and so that people do not steal them away. And any Chinese who come here, they have to have one of these. And the other thing is, except for the Chinese, nobody else buys it. And he was installed there by one of the kings, believing that it'll scare the evil spirits away and also have victories over the enemies. I did tell you that the name of this place is Kathmandu Darbar Square.
but it's also known as a Hanuman Doka. Now I would like to take you inside the royal palace and tell you a little bit about history about this place and the royal family, please.
Not that tall, I know.
Hey, you look scary.
All right. What is the color of his socks?
Yellow or gold. Saffron. Saffron.
Isn't that very unusual?
Yeah.
See, what had happened was when they were fighting the Brits, there was an economic blockade. And everything came from India. And when they got together, they actually wanted white socks. But there wasn't enough materials for all the soldiers. And they came to know that the only material that they had, which was enough for all the soldiers, was that kind of a color. Now this dress that you do see, which you will not see the Gurkhas wearing some other places, they have now been declared as a priest platoon. They don't go and fight wars. They use them only on ceremonial occasions. So, but the Gurkhas, when they first came into existence, that's how they dressed up. And the first king of Gurkha was seen wearing an outfit like that. Sir, thank you.
Just come into the palace grounds.
Can I have you this off, please? You'll have plenty of time to take pictures later.
Often ask me, Sanjeev, when are you freed by the British? Do you realize that we are one of the very few countries in this part of the world that has never been colonized? We're never a part of India, never a part of China, or for that matter, the British Empire. But yes, we did have a war with the Brits from 1814 till 1816. And before the war, the size of Nepal used to be double of the present size. Parts which are now in India, like Darjeeling, you heard about that place, which is famous for growing tea, right, was Nepal. Tell me, have you heard about which used to be a small kingdom called Sikkim? And do you know why is that? That's because now Sikkim has become a part of India, but in the 60s, an American girl called Hope Cook had married the king of Sikkim. And she made the headline news. Later they got divorced, and half of Sikkim used to be part of Nepal. We lost the war and we had to give up those parts. But the good thing about the war was that the Brits were so much impressed with the fierce fighting of the Nepalese soldiers that since then they started taking them in the army, which is now known as the Gurkha soldiers. And when I talk about Gurkha soldiers, people are under the impression that it's a different ethnic group. Not true. Now I'm a Nepali. If I were to go to England or India and join the army, as I come from Nepal, I'd be known as a Gurkha soldier, right? But having said that, I come from the family of the Brahmins, and you must have noticed that my features are very similar of an Indian. That's because when India got invaded by the Mughals, we Brahmins were the biggest targets because we had a lot of clout in the society. We worked as advisors and we could brainwash people. So they wanted to get rid of us. So we fled and came to this part of the world and settled at a height of 8,000 feet where they couldn't come and get us. And when they left, then we slowly came down and moved down, right? So I do not have the right features, do not have the right courage, morale. So have you noticed that the Gurkhas usually have Mongolian features? It's only those 4 ethnic groups who have their origin from Tibet who actually get recruited by the British as a Gurkha soldier. And in that tradition, where there's been a tradition of the parents, uncles going and joining the British Army, and if the sons don't make it, there even have been cases where the kids have committed suicide for not getting into the British Army. Because if their father was good enough, their uncles were good enough, and you know, we were talking about Michael Palin writing the Himalaya book. Who was it who was talking about it? Right? And in that, you know, that was a time when the Maoists was there, and they were the British colonel who are here to recruit those people, and that British colonel actually gets kidnapped by the Maoists. Not because they wanted to kidnap him so that it would make the headline news, right? And later, and as you know, we got reconciled. We lost a lot of territory. In 1857 in India, they had a mutiny war where they were revolting against the Brits. So the Prime Minister at that time had sent 32,000 troops to help the Brits crush the rebels. And the Brits were so much happy with that gesture that some of the land that was taken away from them in 1816 were given back to them, which is now in the western part of Nepal. And as the Brits were there, we had to keep them in good humor, right? We were like friends, but we always feared the Brits. It was a big empire. So in order to keep them happy, the royalties or the rulers, they would organize massive hunts in the southern part of Nepal, where I take my tourists to see tigers. 1938, when George V, I think Edward, when he came here, 2 weeks time, they killed 110 tigers, 18 rhinoceros, 17 leopards, and I guess 14 bears. Incredible, right? And they were so happy, and the rulers always wanted to go to England. Their ambition in life was to go to England and meet the Queen. So, and they would put a lot of pressure on the viceroys and the British dignitaries that they get invited by the English government, and they went to London. The first Prime Minister who went there in 1850, his journey lasted 18 months. When he got there, he liked everything, including the weather, right? Tried different wine, and he actually had an affair with a girl that he wanted to marry, and he was thinking about appointing himself as a Prime Minister and stay there for 5 months. From his brothers, that would not have been the appropriate thing for him to do. And when they came back, they made these neoclassical buildings. Do you notice that from the outside it does look very Roman or neoclassical, whatever you call it? And also the other thing is, see, when they had gone in that trip, the first Prime Minister, we're all human beings born to make mistakes, and we Hindus say that you can actually wash your sins away. But how do you do that? So what they did was, they actually had a priest who was a part of an entourage, and his job was to tick down the number of mistakes that the Hindus rulers would have committed knowingly or unknowingly while they were in Europe. So on the way back, they stopped in Varanasi, where you were, and the ruler said, "Priest, how many?" And he says, "Your Majesty, 678. So they dip in the Ganges, they change their sacred thread, which I would like to tell you about. This is pretty much like what they have in the Jewish religion called the Bar Mitzvah. When you are a certain age, that's when you have to have it, and I'll tell you more about it. They changed their sacred thread, and they donated that 678 cows to the priest and the poor, did some ceremony, and only they came back to Nepal. Right? Isn't that interesting? There's a great book called Tiger for Breakfast. It's written by Michael Palin, and this is where the deposed king grandfather was born. The building that I did show you was done in 1969, but when they moved from here, there was another part of the palace which is not visible, but that's where they stayed there. This used to be the property of the king when Nepal was a kingdom, but after it became a republic, it has all been nationalized. And also the other thing is, do you know that in 2001, June 1st, that's one day no Nepali will ever forget in their lifetime. And Nepal is now a republic because of that incident to a certain extent. See, what had happened on that day was, it's one of the biggest controversies. The Crown Prince, who was drunk, high on drugs, was mad at his mother and his father because they would not let him marry the girl that he wanted to, that he was in love with. Did you know about it? So on that day, when they're all having a dinner together, he has few drinks, goes upstairs, comes back, and he was a colonel. As a Crown Prince, you automatically are a colonel. And then he was there with the AK-47. And the first person that he shoots is his father. That he starts shooting everybody there. And later, the last time he was seen was, he was being chased by his younger brother and his mother, and all three bodies were found dead outside that building where the party happened, and 10 people went on to lose their lives. And many people in Nepal do not still believe that it was the crown prince who did it, but they like to believe that it was the uncle of the crown prince who later went on to become the king. And what makes it, that's because, you know, that saying, give a dog a bad name and you might as well as hang him. He was the one who was never in favor of having democracy in Nepal. In 1990, when his brother decided to step down from an absolute monarch to a constitutional monarch, he had a heated argument with the American ambassador and the Indian ambassador, saying that Nepal was not ripe enough for democracy. But there was a lot of pressure from the Western world, and you might say, what's that got to do? The Western world pressure, because the amount of money and aid that we get from India and the Western world, we cannot survive here, right? So, and the king, who actually stepped down, who got shot by his own son, he was a very sensible man, he was very educated. Darjeeling in this part of the world are famous for two things: good schools, and after finishing, and tea of course, and after finishing his high school, he went to Eton in England, Harvard in America, and in Tokyo. And when he traveled, he traveled only with 4 pairs of clothes. And his saying was, you do not wear too many clothes, you wear clean clothes. But his wife was our version of Imelda Marcos of the Philippines. Don't ask me how many pairs of shoes she had, but she ran all the business. She wanted a share in everybody. And the reason, you know, I've read some of the autobiographies written by the army generals who served the royal palace for 30, 40 years. See, the problem with the crown prince was his father was too busy. I mean, traveling, he really wanted to uplift the standard of the people, right? And he would go to places incognito, did I say the right word? And he would listen to their problems, and if anything could be fixed, he could do it straight away. He was not after money, and his mother was too busy making money. And she was also a de facto ruler, which people did not like, right? And so he was left with soldiers, and when he was 12, he was given a pistol for his birthday. And he was often seen at the royal palace. For some reason, they never got along together, right? And when he was sick, story has it that his mother even didn't come to see him for 1 whole month. She wouldn't even give him the allowance which was allocated by the government for the crown prince. And rumor also had it that if they would not let him marry the girl that he was in love with, his younger brother that he loved dearly was going to be named as the next crown prince and the future king of Nepal. And he was often heard saying, this was of course we got to hear later, he would say that if I do go down, I will take down the institution with me. And the thing is, when they found his body, that's another mystery. Was he still alive or was he dead? But we'll never know. But I would like to show you the pictures later, and his picture is also there as one of the kings. Story has it, his grandmother, or the Queen Mother, wanted to make sure that his name would also go down in the history of Nepal as one of the kings. So he was declared as a king while he was in a coma, and that he died when he was in a coma, and then his uncle became the king. The man we all love to hate. And he was the one who ran all the brewery business, the tobacco business. He was like a dictator. He dissolved the parliament, sacked the prime minister behind bars, and started acting like a 17th century dictator. And the first thing that he did for his son, who is a mini version of Uday Hussein, who is now behind bars in Bangkok under the charges of possession of marijuana for the 3rd time. We saw him in the paper. I could not believe it. He was a good-looking guy. He looked like a rock star, but when we saw him handcuffed, I was so embarrassed, and I kind of felt sad. But his father, he started ruling Nepal like a 17th century dictator, and when people opposed, and we had the same kind of scenario that they had in Egypt when Hosni Mubarak was thrown out of power, and there was curfew imposed, but people were defying the curfew orders. There were tanks rolling out on the streets. 58 people went on to lose their lives. And there was, again, was so much of pressure from the Western world, and there was some agreement that the king wouldn't have to leave Nepal, he wouldn't have to go in exile, and he would not be persecuted. And then he stepped down, and then Nepal became a republic. Story has it, he's often seen cooling his heels at the American ambassador residence and the Indian ambassador residence, and also making frequent visits to India, hoping that when they are in the process of drafting a constitution, there will be a space for him and he would be a constitutional monarch again. And if that does happen, please help me find a green card. I'll come and live in the States. Airport where you landed upon your arrival, 3 Vuban. That's the king, that's the deposed king grandfather. And if you look at the dates, you can tell that he became a king when he was only 5. And by the time he was 12, he had 2 wives. And even his son says that my dad probably doesn't remember how many wives and concubines he had, but that's what royalty used to be like. From 1846 till 1950, our Prime Minister had established such a system in Nepal that the brother of the Prime Minister would automatically go on to be the next Prime Minister. That I'll talk about tomorrow. So he restored democracy. He was a prisoner in his own palace. And he couldn't come out of the palace. And after a certain age, the crown prince were kept away from the father. So with the help of the Indians and the freedom fighters of Nepal, he restored monarchy. And most of the things, the big buildings, including the airport, have been named after him, right? And he died in 1955. He was taken to Zurich, Switzerland, but you know, it was too late for him, and that's where he got killed. But his body was brought back home, and I remember my granddad, my father telling me he'd never seen so many people, right? But you know, but there weren't too many people in the valley anyway. But people still do remember him a lot, right? And the other thing is, the good king that we're all talking about, who went to Eton, Harvard, and Tokyo, who traveled with 4 pairs of clothes, right? And unfortunately, who got killed by his own son. Like I said, it's the biggest mystery in the history of Nepal. It's like asking the Americans who killed JFK, right? So that's him. And that's the son who's believed, that's the official version, who's believed to have done all the killings, right? Who was declared as a king for a very short period of time, and he was known for his short tempers. And there is a man, when he became the king, who dissolved the parliament, sacked the prime minister behind bars under the charges of corruption, and started ruling like a 17th century dictator. And like I said, he was the man who we all love to hate. And I'll be honest, till his time, I've always been a royalist. I would have been okay with him, because you know, he's got royal blood. But before even he became a king, he ran all the business, right? He looked after all the foreign affairs, which people didn't like. And you know, I was with a group that got stuck here. I took them to the royal palace, and there was someone who had served in the palace for 30 years, and he told me about how different these 2 brothers were. This king would go around patting to the people and even shaking hands. Now in our culture, you don't do that. When you face the royal family, you go like this and you don't turn your back on him. If you're the king, I walk like this, and I never show. But when they would know that this guy was coming, they would be like alert. He wanted everything clean. He was a dictator. So I'm so glad that when Nepal became a republic, and he is maintaining a low profile, but like I said, rumor has it that he's trying to make a comeback. So the king's name is Birendra, right, who went to Eton. He also went to Eton. He was known as Dipendra, but while he was there, he was known as Dippy. That's what they call him. That was his nickname, and that's King Gyanendra, who still lives here. But like I said, his son is behind bars under the charges of possession of marijuana. and they never did get along together. He's married to a beautiful woman, not only good looking, but with a beautiful heart, 3 children, but we never get to see them together in public. But it will be too long a walk, but the rickshaw ride is only about 10 to 12 minutes, and we'll go straight to lunch, please.
Okay, I want you to please get on this, please.
We're off for another joyride.
See, before Buddhism became the official religion of Tibet, there used to be a religion called Bon, B-O-N. And they always believed that there were evil spirits hanging up in the air. So they used to build their monasteries way high up into the mountains. And they used to have these prayer flags, so that would keep the evil spirits away. So when Buddhism, which was introduced by a Nepalese princess, because she got married to a Tibetan prince, and when she got married, in a form of a dowry, she had taken a lot of statues of Buddha. And she convinced the king in the 7th century that that should be the state religion. And when that happened, obviously there was a lot of conflict between the people who wanted a new religion or stick with the old religion. So it was a compromise of both the religions. So that originally comes from the Bon religion. And they have a prayer written on it, and whenever the wind blows, that means you're saying your prayer. If you look at the colors, in a prayer flag you'll only find 5 colors. The 5 elements, as we call it. White is the space, red is the flame, yellow is the earth, green is the air, and blue is the water. And also you'll notice that a stupa in Nepal is always solid and domed. You can never go inside it. There's no evidence that Buddha visited Nepal.
flight over the Himalayas. Our flight number 301 was leaving at 6:45. First out.
Travel passengers are requested to proceed to gate number 2. Thank you.
So the men go through the gates here to the airline, and ladies go through here. So we're waiting to board our flight 301 to fly over the Himalayas this morning. that's Everest.
Thank you.
Total population of the land that we have, 25% of the land can be cultivated, including up into the mountains. They may not be able to grow rice, but they grow potatoes with the shepherd's leaf, and they grow barley, right? But the 17% down below, that's considered to be the breadbasket. That's where it comes from. But out of the total land that is cultivated, only 8% of them have the irrigation facilities. So by and large, we have to depend on monsoon, which comes from late June till September, and the average rainfall that we get here is 80 inches a year. Last year, see, when the farmers wanted it to rain in order to plant their rice, it didn't come. And certain places where they had rain, they had a post-monsoon, and that spoiled the crops. So as a result of that, I wouldn't use the word drought, but a shortage of rice. So we're now importing rice, which we used to export to India and Bangladesh. So the inflation rate is like, for edible things, is almost like 20%. That's way too much.
And you think climate change has had an effect?
Definitely, it has to do with the climate change. See, previously you would know that when like Asad 15, which is a Nepali month, we knew that was a day, it was sure to rain, and that is the day when the farmers would have their beaten rice and yogurt, because that was the main day when they would all plant their rice. But for the last 2 years, it didn't rain. Not only that day, the whole week it did not rain, and people were very disappointed with that. This is one of the oldest ways that people have been worshipping Shiva in our religion. The round thing is known as yoni, and the top is the phallic symbol. When combined together, that becomes a source of energy or fertility, which tells you how the creation has been going on in the world. And it's also very popular with those women who are not fertile. Remember the temple that I told you, which is a UNESCO Heritage Site, where many Indians come? And you know, when my wife became pregnant, there was a lot of pressure on her to go and visit these lingams so that she would have a son. Because our religion does say that the doors to heaven will not open up unless or until you don't have a son. We'd already made up our mind that we're going to have only one child. But my mother and her mother said, "Oh, did you visit the lingam today? Did you go there?" And there are lingams everywhere, right? And we all breathed a sigh of relief when it was a boy, right? So that is the symbol of fertility. That's Ganesh. You do know that in Hinduism, before you actually start any celebrations, you worship that god first. And do you know why that is? See, story has it, Lord Shiva and his wife, they wanted to test their children. One is Ganesh, who has the head of an elephant, and the other, who had wings, he could fly. So Shiva said, whoever can make the round of a universe and gets back first, gets an award. And the brother who had wings, he just took off. Ganesh being too heavy, right? He was as slow as a snail. And there was no way he was going to beat his brother. So what he does is, he makes a circle of his parents 3 times, and he said, "You are my universe." And they were so pleased with that gesture that he got a blessing saying that from now onwards, for any celebration, any festival, before they start the festival, you will be remembered first. So if you're sitting for an examination, if you're traveling abroad, you're opening your business, you're getting weddings or anything like that, so we worship Ganesh first. So he's the one who brings you good luck and removes all the trouble. This guy actually comes from Bengal. And that's where we get our rain from, the Bay of Bengal. कौन सी जगह? Kolkata?
Malda.
Kolkata से कितना दूर है?
300 kilometers.
From Kolkata, it's 300 kilometers. So what this guy does is, you see all these utensils, आप रहते कहाँ हो भैया?
Balaju.
Balaju. And he is like at least 2 hours drive on a local bus. आप यहाँ हर दिन आते हो? And he comes here every day, commuting in that local bus. और कितना घंटा पैदल चलते हो आप?
10 घंटा.
Huh?
10 घंटा.
He says on an average he walks for like 8 to 10 hours. He goes from houses to houses selling these utensils. और अगर बिजनेस अच्छा हुआ तो एक दिन में कितना कमाते हो भैया?
होगा 300-400.
And he says if business is good, he can make a profit of $4. And you know, I take my hats off to these guys. And we got thousands of these people. We Nepalese think it's life is better there and they think it's better here. But the thing is, if they were to work as hard, and if the Nepalese were to work as hard as they here, life would be so better. The worst part is they were away from their family for such a long period of time. And with due respect, the Indians who are here, they do not get treated right. And the Nepalese who work in India, they do not get the same respect. I wish the situation is improved, right? And we say, oh, you're from down south, you're an Indian. And the people from Nepal say, from India said, oh, you always serve in our army, you work as night guards, right? You work as waiters. And they want them to work for them, but they do not get the same respect. But I take my hats off to this man, right? Doing that every day. और कितना साल से कर रहे हैं भैया आप?
हम 1 साल से.
Oh, he's very new. He's been here only a year. आप वहाँ बंगाल से छोड़ के यहाँ क्यों आए भैया?
यहाँ आ गया. यहाँ दूसरा आदमी साथ पकड़ के आ गया.
अच्छा, और वो बोला यहाँ अच्छा है. He said, how did you end up here? He said, a friend of mine who's been here for a long period of time, he said, you'll have to work hard, but life would be better in Nepal than it is here. और आपका परिवार कहाँ है?
बंधन में है.
His family is back home. और आप घर गए कि नहीं 1 साल से?
गए? हाँ, 1 महीना 1.5 महीना रुकता है पर घर जाता है.
Oh, he says, how often do you go home? I said, I'm here for 2-3 months, then I go, then I come back. What happens is, they got 3 colors. 9 black, 9 white, and 1 is the red. You could either play singles or you play doubles. And whoever gets those chips in the holes first, they win the game. But the queen has to go last before 1. Right?
Wow, that was
He's good, right? And you cannot do sidewise. You have to rebound it. If you have a chip in here, you cannot go like this. And the hardest part is to rebound it. See? But he's great.
Looks like the red one got in there.
Yeah. Now, because he still got one more. So once he puts it there, once he gets it in the hole, he's got to put it back again. If he would have gotten the white one, he would have won the game. Right? But since he couldn't do it, now what he's trying to do is, oh boy, this is going to be, now he could win the, oh, so close.
For the people in the summer because they got the shade, right? So you cannot have the best of both worlds. When I came here first, no, you wouldn't see anybody wearing Western style clothes, for example, these girls, right? And the tradition was that they just wouldn't send them to schools because they thought, they would get married and they would teach them more about how to be a good daughter-in-law about it. And they don't use engineers, they don't have maps. They just come here and because it's their profession. Basically they're all farmers. But apart from that, they got a lot of skills. They can do their own plumbing, they're good carpenters, and they can make these houses. So everybody helps each other. And this is the way that it's been. So they know exactly how to do it. My only worry is, because of the movements of the plates, we do get big earthquakes, right? With the Indian plates pushing the Tibetan plates, yeah? And that's how the Himalayas were formed, right? When those 2 plates collided together, that massive force had to go somewhere, and that came the Himalayas. And as the plates are being collided, pushed towards each other, we do get small tremors. But at times you do get big ones. Now if you're in town, you actually have to go to the town council and get an approval. And now they say that the building that you're making, you should do it in such a style that you have to have so much of iron that it can hold an earthquake of 7.5 Richter scale. But I'm sorry to tell you that if we have an earthquake that same scale, that's not going to be there for too long. See these bricks? What they did is when they demolish the houses, they always save this because they can reuse them. And they tell me these are much higher, even though they were done about 50, 60 years ago, than the ones that they make it now. Baini? Oh.
So any celebration that they have in this village, it's done right in here. And you see that thing coming down? I think you have a word for it in Christianity called Jacob's ladder. That's our version of a Jacob's ladder. And the name of the temple is Indrayani.
Usually spends the daytime here. She needs it. She's got arthritis, she's got gas, and she's got a son who's away. So the whole village is taking care of her. One time when I came here, there were a poor woman bathing her. Right? And when people were trying to take a picture, she didn't like it. And you know, that is understandable. And also,
We have more than 123 dialects, but 100 ethnic groups, but it's only 2 ethnic groups in Nepal where the woman must have a tattoo. The reason for that is the caste system, which has always been there. If you came from a lower caste, you could not have any kind of ornaments, or you could wear silver later, but as they wanted to look pretty, so they had their tattoos, and it was all done use. They would actually make a paste with a little bit of mustard oil and lots of turmeric, which is like antiseptic, right? And also in the other ethnic group, they believe that if a girl dies and if she doesn't have a tattoo, they believe that they will not go to heaven. So sometimes they die young. Now instead of cremating them straight away, they first have a tattoo and only then they cremate the person. And she does know that whenever I come here, Ma, hey, Ashirwad do, Ashirwad. Luckily I do speak that dialect, but her accent and some of the words that is not very clear, but what I can tell you is she's saying it's too dusty. I'm beginning to develop an allergy, right?
how old are you? She said, I don't know, but I already have one junk book with 77 things.
उहाँलाई धन्यवाद भन्ने Okay, you yes, man? Okay. If you're wondering what's this all about, now they realize that the water supply is not as good. So what they've done is they opened up the whole thing and they find out that there is a leakage in it. So they are trying to fix the whole thing, and hopefully after that the supply of water will be much better.
And they're teasing me. You know, this is what about? And I said, I don't get it. And he said, well, you get dollars, right? And you can buy these big aqua jars. Right? And you know, like I said, when I ask people what is it that you like the most, they all say it's people, people, people. They are so friendly. And you know, no matter where I take you, whether it's up into the mountains or you come here, they always welcome you like that mother. I always make it a point to go and spend some time. But you must not take me, but you get one. And you say, we should advance, right? And even though like saying, Mandir, you down some and keep us over there. Other interesting like that.
Yes, after they would have done that, some of the offerings, which would have beaten rice, beans, other things, bananas, they put it out here, and these are actually meant for the animals, for ducks. So whenever you see something like this, that tells you that they had some kind of a ceremony in the house. If you see the hammer and sickle, that's a symbol of the Maoist party, which I hate. The sun is the symbol of the Communist Party. Remember, the Maoist Party is a breakaway faction of the Communist Party. Because when they came in power, they realized that if they were to be like old communists, they had no chances of winning the elections. First, they became anti-religious, anti-royalist, but they became more royalist, more religious. So I have some of my friends, and when they started acting that way, I used to call them the royal religious Gucci communists, right? So the sun is their symbol. The tree is the symbol of the Democratic Party. It's the tree and this which is the coalition government trying to draft a constitution. So when you go to vote, so you do not vote for the names, you vote for the symbols. And they have that swastika, you know that swastika? It's the other way around, it's a sign of a good luck. And when you do that, it has to be right in that space. It cannot touch the line up above and down below. Right? So many of these votes, because they do not know how to vote it, in spite of them being taught how to do it. Right? And they cannot get it right, so many of them go invalid. And the Maoists said, we're now down to 23 because most of our votes were invalid. that was the excuse. They are illiterate because, you know, there was no need for them to get educated. There were no opportunities and farming. Their status symbol was how many water buffaloes they had, how much milk they could milk out of a water buffalo, and what was their harvest like. That was more important. But now, not only the parents but also the government needs that people need to be educated. So that's why schooling has becoming free, but it's not compulsory. For the elections last year, it was very good. The survey does say that almost 69% of the people in Nepal voted, and you have to be 18 to vote. Previously, you used to have a lot of proxy voting, right? And if you're in a locality and you're affiliated with some party, you could go and do it, but now you need a voter's ID. You show that to them, and they will be representatives of all the political parties. You show that to them, and then only you get to vote. And also what they do is, they give you a mark here, which does not come out just like that, right? Stay there for weeks and weeks. But previously, when we had proxy voting, one people would vote 7 times under different names. So before they went there, they would have a cold cream. So the minute they would have it, stamp it, and with that cold cream, they could take that stain away. And they would go to another booth or in the same boat, and that is cheating, cheating, cheating. And I tell you, a lot of election in this part of the world, the reason why Maoist got 120 seats because it was rigged. Jimmy Carter has a foundation called the Carter Foundation. He himself came here and monitored the whole election. And he did say that the first election where the Maoists had 120 seats was a fair election, but later when he was told by different political parties, Mr. President, you only got to see the booths in Kathmandu. In remote areas where the Maoists were running a parallel government, they had their kangaroo coats and they had their guns. People were forced to vote for them. And in those places where they didn't vote for the Maoists, they actually cut their electricity supply and water supply. Their number for their water bills, right? So whenever you see a sign like this, a plate like this, that does tell you that they have running water facilities. So the guy, I was told that in the States you have a guy driving and he has like a radar, right? Here, he goes and checks the meter, and if there's no meter, like I pay like $15. I don't get any water, right? But we do have a well. We call it a robo pump, where we've gone down 70 feet down. We pump it up, filter the water, and then again pump it up on the top of the house, and then that gets circulated. That we use only to do our laundry. We're lucky the iron content is very low, because a lot of places where you do get water, it's got a big content of iron, and your white shirt after a few weeks goes yellow.
That's the party sign again on that building.
They said, do you work 8 hours a day? They said, the more I can do it, the more money I can make. Start 6 in the morning till 7 at night. Oh, they pay them by meters, okay? And I'm sure she must be from the mountains, or she must be very close to the Mount Everest. Oh, she's from the eastern part. Yeah, I was right. She is one of those Tamans, which are the hill tribes people. And then she says, my daughter goes to grade 2 right now. Oh, you are very beautiful and you're very young. And our son is in kindergarten. And I said, doesn't that hurt your back? The poster there says, yes, but you know. The farmers, I think, the two of them are sisters. I never see them at the time of the harvesting because they are in the fields. I said, we go to school? I said, we could have school. I said, you shouldn't have done that. They get the pashmina. They do not say they make the pashmina. But after that, you know, they put their own designs.
Takes 3 days to make.
No, this is not just Pretty? And they work like 10 hours a day. Pretty. Beautiful. Gorgeous.
It's so beautiful. Oh, look at the ones over in the corner. They're all over. Wow.
Have you noticed their teeth? Are they pretty?
Beautiful smile.
I asked the mother and she said no, and then I asked another.
That's Ganesh. That's the first peak that you saw when you went on the flight this morning. And to your right hand side, you can see a peak sticking out. That's 23,993 feet. The range of Langtang. But the one to your extreme left, with looks like a shape of a triangle, that's Manasalu, and that's one of the highest peak in the world, the 14th highest peak in the world. So when you see Manasalu from here, that does tell you that it is a beautiful day. You got it?
You're still okay?
Yeah, we're fine. Thank you. I'm biking group.
Cycling group.
What does it say on here? So it's a Buddhist?
Looks like yeah, sure. Madam is in about 250s. What is it that you like, sir?
Well, I couldn't see him from out there.
Actually, the house this is a symbol, endless knot of good luck.
Okay. I want these two.
Did you say? 150 each.
USA.
USA, Kansas?
USA, Kansas.
Kansas.
Good, very good.
Okay. And it's very hazy, don't go away please. And Annapurna one is the highest, which is 8,091 meters. And that was the first mountain above 8,000 meters to have been climbed. So So it's been a very good day. I mean, how often anybody gets to see Everest and Annapurna on the same day? I know that it could be a lot better, but you couldn't have seen anything. So this is a good day for us. So that's that Mount Rodwood Austin.
We just discovered some marijuana growing here.
It grows wild.
Good quality.
It grows like a weed. That's probably what they call it. She says the mother's gone to pick up the nettles. And she says, how do you know it? Because most of the people think that when we have that, we eat that because we got nothing else to eat. Oh, that's so cute. Baru. Now she asked me in her language, aren't you one of us? I said, no, I'm a Brahmin. And they have a word for Brahmin. They call it Burmu. And I said, I'm a Burmu. Well, there was the another Verga Vasa.
You're a pain in the neck is what they say, huh?
Those girls, they come from remote areas. So like those girls, they need to work. It's like the Mexican here, they're prosperous. And for them, it's a necessity. For her, this will be a bonus. Oh, I give it over. The green tara, it's a special order. This is a special order. What do you like? You should from 5 in the morning till 7. I do some more. And by the time he's done with that, it'll take him 18 days. One person doing it. What do you want to bet? And he sells it for $150. Well, this place is a place of auditions. What do you think? Oh, this cannot be new one. You know what it is? In the olden days, they used to put oil in it.
School. One man has raised the money to build this school for disabled children. They'll be coming from all over the area. They're making beds. This is are they making beds here?
Beds and doors. See the doors in the back?
Right. Doors.
This would be a wooden.
An ad for a free dental clinic that's taking place, not only dental but other health things, like you can have your blood group tested, other small things, and dental care.
And the government pays for that?
And the government pays for it. All hand done. And you know that God? That's known as the God of compassion. Our locator in Buddha. Exactly. What? You know what God is? Yeah. Because true hand alone is not good enough to have all the mankind.
Beautiful frames.
And Buddha is You can use battery. Yeah. But I hope all of you are enjoying it. Thank you.
Molasses and a paste of a black lentil. So this is Patan Darbar Square, and the word Darbar meaning a palace.
We just walked to this beautiful garden restaurant. Sanjay, tell us where we are now.
We are now in the old city of Patan. We have 3 different cities, but this is the oldest. And people also say that this dates back from 3rd century BC. Ashoka, the great warrior, and it was him who was responsible for spreading Buddhism in Central Asia. Some people also like to believe that this city may have been founded by Ashoka, the great warrior himself, but that is open to debate. It's also known as Lalitpur, and the word Lalitpur meaning the city of fine arts.
All the 3 different cities, you will notice that they very much look alike and they have the same similarities. And the similarities that can be found in all the 3 different cities are, every city would have an old royal palace. And outside the palace, in the square, there will be a statue of a king, a big bell on the other side, and too many temples. And talking about temples and gods and goddesses, we have a saying that in Kathmandu, we probably have more temples than houses and more gods than people. At least that's the way it used to be. And if you're wondering why they have all the similarities and why they very much look alike, that's because before 1768, all the three different cities that we now have in the valley were actually three tiny small kingdoms. And when they were tiny small kingdoms, the kings were always busy fighting amongst each other, and they had a competition. Say if one king would build one temple, the other would make two, just to outdo each other. And also back in the olden days, see, there was no need for you to build a highway. You didn't have to do a research on Ebola, AIDS, cancer, no schools, no colleges. So the only thing that they had to do was to make temples. And the kings and the rulers believed that the more temples they built, the more public baths they built for the people, the more merits they get. And also, people had to pay taxes. And they were not people like me trying to evade my taxes. They took pride in paying their taxes, and it used to be labor taxes. So people came forward and they took part in building all these temples. Even though this is considered to be the oldest city, 3rd century BC, we do not have evidence of that, but we do have evidence from 5th century onwards. So even then, that goes on to make it the oldest city. Now, tell me how many of you have been to Indonesia or Bali? Do you know the name of the Indonesian airlines? Garuda. There, yes, sir. Do you know that Garuda is actually a mythical bird in Hinduism? But if you go to Bali, you will notice that a lot of rituals that they do is very similar to what you've seen in the Ganges, right? Because they've been highly influenced, and many of the words that they have in their language actually comes from Sanskrit. Like, do you know Sukarno Putri, the president? Sukarno Putri means, the word Putri is a daughter in our language, and in their language too. Because she was the daughter of Sukarno, so she's known as Sukarno Putri. This kind of architecture is known as Sikhara. And where did that come from? It's a Sanskrit word called Sikhar, which means the top of a mountain, because it does go like the top of a mountain. And there is the Garuda. Now when you go to Indonesia, you'll notice that the face is more animal-like, but here it's more human-like. That's because the king who made it, they actually put their own faces, right? And this was the first temple to have been made out of stone 300 years ago. And back in those days when they had no cement, how would they make that paste together? So the technology that the people developed at that time, and which some people still do it today, is they would pound the bricks, take the powder out of it, and then to which they would add lime, molasses, and a paste of a black lentils. And you'll be surprised to know that in this part of the world where we are used to having these big earthquakes, and when many of these buildings come tumbling down, buildings done in that style have always stood the earthquake.
passing the bus on the other side. The roads are very narrow. Really can get by.
Langtang starting from there,
Term though.
and then you have Dorje Lakpa, right?
Okay.
And if you come that way, there's like one sticking like a thumb.
Okay.
That's called Choba Bhamare. And that is the holy mountain called Gauri Sankar.
Weather.
We're going to lunch. And this is another bar just as you go outside. The door is right behind me.
The city of the devotees, and this is a city that dates back to 9th century. And like I said, among the 3 cities of the valley, this is the only place which has been saving its old traditions and craftsmanships. And these kids must be on a field trip.
Yes.
How do you like Bhaktapur? It's beautiful?
Yes.
You think Kathmandu is beautiful or this is beautiful? This is beautiful. Have a good time. Same to you.
There's a restaurant up there?
Sorry I disappeared everybody, but you know, she really needed a back. Sorry I disappeared everybody, but you know, she...
Okay, the tallest temple, 1702,
I'm so sorry.
remain intact even at the time of the earthquake of 1934. And those are the wrestlers who are believed to be 10 times more powerful than an average person. They came to Nepal to demonstrate their fighting skills. They got so popular that they ended up being bodyguards to the royal family. And after that, we have the elephants, suggesting that those elephants were 10 times more powerful than those powerful person. And the same theory would apply to the lions, the mythical griffins, the tiger's goddess on one side. And finally, inside the temple, the image of the goddess, meaning that she is the most powerful in the whole world. And the name of this temple is Nyatapola, meaning a 5-story temple. And I'll take you to the main square last, but this temple is almost gone. right? And thanks to their $15, they just recently renovated it. Yon uttejana badaunalai man of few words, you're right. Ooh, ke ho yo? Eli ke garcha? Oh, this is our version of a Viagra, that's what he tells me. And he says, you add it with milk and drink it. Kati halna parcha yo? And he said, in a glass of milk, you put about half a spoonful of it, and you feel rejuvenated. 1 kilo, which is 2.2 pounds, will cost you $160 into 40 times. Do you still want to buy it, sir?
Carmelo?
But he knows his stuffs, right? And these are the things, you know, people had used in the past. Like I said, you know, there were people in the last times where people were living for a longer time. Like the Tharus, who had their own medicines for malaria. They knew what was the right thing, what was the wrong thing. And you go up into the mountains, you know, you get a cut. What do? They have no thing. So they make a paste out of turmeric, put it here, and that heals the wound. And if you get burned, what do? They cut a tomato, put it all over the place, and you never get blisters. These are the remedies that we still use at home. But you know, that is something that they do within the family. So this guy obviously knows something, and maybe in his village he would be revered as a doctor. But what's happening is now, many places in Nepal, there are 32 medicines that you get free. And out of those 32, 4 of them are for women who are pregnant. Right? That's great. So now people are slowly thinking, hey, the modern medicines are good. So why take these? And because these things take a long time to heal, with modern medicines, you know, you have a quick result.
Does he grow these things? Or pick
No, he picks them and he collects them from certain areas. These are the same mushroom that we saw them being grown up in mushroom. 1 kilo ko kati parcha? 160. And these are considered to be one of the most expensive things. For a kilo you pay 160 rupees. Whereas other things you can get it for like 30, 40. It's considered to be a delicacy, and these are as fresh. And I said, do you do well? And I see a lot. And I said, oh, they said, with all these tourists coming and with all these restaurants, it sells like hotcake. Also, dinko kati kilo kinnu huncha? She buys on an average anything between 100 to 200 kilos a day. So that tells you it's good for the farmers, it's good for her, and it's good for the restaurant because they get to rip you off. From the other side, and what they do is, there is a guy who, that's the potter's wheel to my right hand side. He's not there, and they make him the old-fashioned ways, and in order to rotate it, he uses a bamboo. And then he makes one of those, and the amazing thing is, it rotates till the time, till he is finished making one of these. He knows exactly how long to rotate it, and then they dry them in the sun. And this is great weather for them. 2 days, 3 days, then they paint them. And it's only after they've been dried, they go to a kiln where they fire them, and then they sell them. And I know they got some great stuff, but these are very fragile, right? So like I said, most of the pots, flower pots that you see all over Kathmandu, the majority of them seems to come from this area. If anybody would have seen the movie, the this little Buddha, I don't think anybody has. Have you? No? If you ever go back and decide to see it, when Buddha comes out of the palace the first time and when he sees an old and a sick and a dying man, those are the steps that he takes in the movie right up there, where he sees an old and a dying man. What you call tankas. Many people say that these are Nepalese art. It's an Himalayan art. You find them in Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim. And the concept was that because, you know, when you carry your idol, you couldn't put it down. And they were too heavy to carry. And also the other thing is, wherever you put down the statue, you had to make a temple. So somebody came up with a bright idea that instead of having them carry these big idols, they would paint their deities on a stretched cotton cloth, which was easy to carry. You could roll them and travel from one place to another. And here in Bhaktapur, most of the women who are farmers, they use them, they wear them on special occasions. The woman with a black sari with a red border, when you see them, you can tell that they come from the farmer's family. The singing bowl.
Can you hear it? Yeah, I'll do it again.
And people use it to cure different aches and pains, for better concentration, for better circulation.
No tosser, feel, only feel. Bring vibrate.
But in 2000, a movie that was done in the far western part of Nepal, where many of these people had never seen a movie before, and they are actually in the movie as characters. It takes you about the salt trade route, because in the olden days we had rock salt, right? So this movie actually got nominated for the Oscars in 2000, and we were all glued to our television hoping that that would go on to. Would you make way for the gentleman, please? It did not win the Oscar, and what happened right there is, this is a person who must have lost either his father or a mother, and this must be the 13th day, right? He has to go a certain place, do the rituals, and when he comes back, nobody's allowed to touch him. So we have these people to make sure that nobody touches him. In the olden days, they said that when you follow that for the first 13 days, if somebody would touch you, you'd have to start it all over again. Now, people do touch it, but they do not follow that strictly. But as the people living in here are very traditional, they like to keep their traditions alive. So that's the movie. I would recommend you highly to see it. Here it was screened as Caravan, but in the Western world it's known as Himalaya. They have a dialect, but they do have subtitles, and it's a great movie. Now the war is a push of a button, but back in those days it was a combat war, as you know it, right? And they not only kill enemies, but you know, they weren't allowed to grow their beard, so they would also shave it with that. And even today up into the mountains, where there's a tradition where people actually want to go and see their sons get into the British Army, they don't want to be a doctor or lawyer or engineer. It's the thing that they want, and if they're looking for a son-in-law and it's made them famous, it's their bread and butter. And because it's made out of iron, it does get rusted. So what you do is, you take it out, you oil them, you leave them in the sun to dry, and you clean it. And the rule is, in that particular ethnic group where you go and become the Gurkhas, who are one of the fiercest fighters in the whole world, you don't put it back in the dagger unless or until you got blood on it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the Gurkhas. One-man army. A Gurkha used 400 bullets, 17 grenades, a mine, and even a tripod to defeat 30 Talibans on his own. That's how fierce they are. And even though they did get into the army from 1816 onwards, but till about some years back, there was a big discrimination. The Gurkhas were being discriminated in the sense that the money that they were getting, the pension was not on par. They couldn't take their families back home. So there was some kind of a resentment. So this lady, I don't know if you ever know, she's a TV actress. Everybody knows about it. Joanne Lumley. Have you heard about her name? She, along with Cherry Blair, the wife of Tony Blair, fought the case for the Gurkhas. And now there is no discrimination, and the Gurkhas who would have served in the British Army or even in the Indian Army, they are now allowed to take their family back home. And when she came here to Nepal, she got the biggest reception ever in Nepal. So all credit to her. When you lose your father or mother, the first 13 days you are like an untouchable, and people observe it in a different way. Like when I lost my father, I could eat only one meal a day. No salt, no curry, no meat, and we were like untouchables. We slept on a thick layer of hay with a white sheet on it, and we were like untouchables. And if somebody would touch us on the 7th day, the religion says you start it all over again. And on the 13th day, we had a little ceremony where we would invite those people who would have attended the funeral of my father, and you're supposed to give them something, because what we say is whatever we donate to the priest, the dead person gets to use it up in heaven. So today is that day, and these are the offerings that they have made, and the priest will take it away. अनि उहाँ चाहिँ अहिले कहाँ जानु भएको त त्यो लिएर मन्दिरमा? उहाँ चाहिँ अहिले कहाँ जानु भएको त? हजुरको? And did you notice that he had something? Those are the offerings, and those are going to a river, which eventually they hope will go and mix with the Ganges in India. So you know, I think I've never ever shown this particular ceremony. You know, we've seen cremations, I've explained how cremation takes place, but to see it like this, I think this is the first time. And also, did you notice that red, which is the color of which is the symbol of happiness, prosperity, for these ceremonies you do not have the red color, you have the yellow color, which is a sign of detachment. They call it the tiger moving game. What it does is, where's the 4th tiger? They have 4 tigers on 4 sides and 16 goats. And the idea is to either, oh, the tiger is sleeping. All right, here's the tiger. The idea is either the tiger kills all the goats, or the goats corner the tiger. So whoever does that, it's only 2 people can play at that time. We call it Bag Chal, meaning the tiger moving game. And up into the mountains, you know, they would not have a board like this. So they would actually draw the board on a big slate, and they would use small pebbles to play this game. And they say something like this costs you like $10 American. Remember, it's only the Tibetan Buddhists who have it in their hands. Apart from the hawkers who have it in their hands, they tell you that it is the people who follow Tibetan Buddhism. I'm a Hindu. We do not have a concept of a prayer wheel, and we do not have prayer flags in our houses. But a local Buddhist, for some reason known to themselves, they would never ever carry one of these in their hands, but they do not mind it going to a stupa and spinning it. And you must have noticed that when we were at the big stupa day before yesterday, I too was spinning those, right? And like it's got 2 prayers in here, and when you give it a spin, that would have meant you would have said your prayer twice. But apart from that, every prayer wheel, you can actually take the top out, and you must have noticed that they have papers inside them. And say if they got 10,000 prayers written in here, and when you give it a spin, that would have meant you would have said your prayer 10,000 times. And they also say that the more you do it, the quicker and closer you are to enlightenment. The original name for it is Mani, because the prayer itself says, Om Mani Padme Hum. But as the tourists call it prayer wheel, everybody has started calling it a prayer wheel. And when you go certain places, they say, oh, buy Om Mani Padme Hum, buy Om Mani Padme Hum. And if you don't want to buy them, when they say buy Om Mani Padme Hum, you say no money, let me go home, right? That works. I saved the best for the last. How do you like the square? Not bad, is it? And I did tell you that every city would have a Darbar square. So we're finally in the Durbar Square. The old building that came tumbling down, that used to be the former palace of the Malla kings, and remember that is the dynasty that ruled the valley of Kathmandu from 13th century till 1768, right? And there you have the famous Golden Gate of Bhaktapur, and even though you do call it the Golden Gate, it's not real gold, because had that been real gold, that would have been stolen a long time ago. And right next to it, there's another part of the palace which is known as the 55-eye window palace, and they can be considered as the masterpieces of wooden architecture that we have in Nepal. They were designed in that way for two reasons. A, the good thing about those windows are you could tell what's happening out, but you got no clue what's happening inside. And also, if you look at the map of the cities carefully, you will notice that they're always centrally located. And every city, I did tell you, have a statue of a king. There you can see it. And you can also see a big bell where people are taking pictures. You know what I'm talking about? But please do not ring that bell. That's because they say that if you keep ringing that bell for about 2 minutes or so, the sound that does come out from it is so irritating and boring that all the dogs around this area, they start barking. So it's also known as a barking bell or a howling bell. And if you see the movie, the little Buddha that I was telling you about, the movie was done right here in the square. But again, you will not recognize the movie. The only things that you will recognize from the movie are those two big lions that you can see as it is.